Well, thank you, David, for coming. It really means a lot to us because last time it was quite a success and it was still a beginning of our podcast. So thank you for doing that. I prepare some certain topics I want to go over with you, and I'm really interested of knowing your own opinion on those topics because nowadays United States is it's a hot melting pot, and we have big important elections coming next week.
Right.
Actually, it's gonna be a week since now, right? Today's
yeah.
second. Yeah. So
basically 5 days from now.
Wow. So
thank God, by the way.
Exactly right. We're gonna get to that. I would like to ask you. You've been around for a while. You live in the U.S. your entire life.
You say I'm old?
Not really. I just said you've been around for a while. You've seen different decades of United States, good times, bad times. What is your take on the current state of the Union?
Well, as I tell my wife, who's from the former Soviet Union, the United States is fairly unrecognizable now, to me, as a guy who grew up in the United States during the 60s and 70s and even the 80s. The United States was a different, had a different cultural feel to it. There was a lot of patriotism, a lot of optimism. We were a very optimistic bunch of people, more or less. We had our problems, obviously, like segregation in the South and things like that. But now it's there's a lot of anti-Americanism within academia, for example, and within haute couture, the highly, the celebrity class, if you will, there's a lot of anti-Americanism. And it's like, for example, we were talking before about censorship. Censorship would have been unheard of 20 years ago. And now censorship is rather common. And what you see is the tech companies acting as an arm, an informal arm maybe, but an informal arm of the Democratic Party or the federal government. And, that is probably statutorily illegal, but it's happening and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. So it's an unrecognizable situation. For me, I feel out of place in my country in many ways now because of that. But, on the other hand, I'd say probably 2/3 of the country is with me. They are puzzled as well. Then the problem you have is political socialization. There are people that will always vote Republican no matter what. There are people that will always vote Democratic no matter what, and they won't look at the actual
issues,
policies and issues associated with those two political parties. At a time when I believe one of our political parties, the Democrats, has been pretty much sort of absorbed by far left elements. You could call them neo-socialists, neo-Marxists. They'll call themselves progressives or whatever, but one of our political parties is nothing like it used to be.
I mean, when you look on issues that they care about, it really looks like they are out of touch with a regular daily citizens, who care about just going through their life, When you look what the Democrats are offering for the elections or the Republicans, I'm not really surprised that a lot of independents are picking the Republican side over
That's
the
happening
Democratic.
right now, according to the polls,
Well, we are going to see, as we said, it's 5 days until a very important election. So
hopefully it'll be over that night, right? I always, I love Europe because they count their votes in one day and it's all done. Here,
you never know.
The political machines, they just keep adding ballots, it seems like to me.
It seems worse and worse and worse,
Yeah.
So when you were talking about the censorship, we can just jump to the next topic that I prepared for us, and that's this one.
Okay.
It's the Huntera Biden story. I covered it on the previous podcast. People really love it because they didn't even know about it.
Of course not.
And we did it like 2 months ago when I mentioned it. But the story is over 2 years old. People didn't know about it because it was heavily censored. And now when Mark Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast, he pretty much confirmed that the FBI came to them right before the election, and they said that there is gonna be a huge dump of Russian disinformation.
Right.
You, as a former intelligence guy, how can you process something like this when they already knew at the time that this topic is real? They had it in their possession. So how the hell they could say that there is some Russian disinformation coming. How is that even possible?
Well, it's possible because everybody has a confirmation bias built into their point of view, right? So if you don't like Trump and your goal is to handicap Trump, and, you know, let's face it, Trump was not a smooth politician. He didn't speak well, and he would come off to educated people kind of goofy sometimes. But what he said really resonated with blue-collar workers, factory workers, you know, things like that, because he kind of talks like them, you know. So maybe overly simplistic, maybe overly broad brushstrokes, but
it worked.
But it worked for him, right? So in this case, I've become very frustrated with the members of the intelligence community because they have become highly politicized and they're overly speculative. In this case, most of them didn't actually see any intelligence. They just speculated and wrote a letter designed to influence the election. And it turned out that they were all wrong at best or lying at worst. So the bad news is that there's a lot of people that are just have put their ideology ahead of honesty and their ideology ahead of fairness. So maybe they believe Trump shouldn't be elected. I get that. Everybody has an opinion on policy, but
it's not up to them. Like who should or should not be elected. It's up to people. If they want to play this card, that the election matters and that the citizens have some certain...
Correct. Well, the issue with this, in this case, is they lent credibility to the whole Russian disinformation narrative that was happening in our country, in the media.
Yeah,
so
for years.
So to see the confluence of interests, you know, you had people like this, you had the media, you had academia, you had Democratic politicians, all saying things that many of them knew were absolutely not true.
Yeah, exactly.
But they were saying them to influence normal people who wouldn't know any better. They want to believe, they want to find out the truth. So obviously, if you get 51 ex-Intel officers to say something, it's going to have credibility.
It's crazy because those people should know better, right?
They should know better.
And also, they are putting the credibility of the institutions they belong to at risk.
They've dirtied the image of the institution. Now people will be less likely to believe them in the future when we might need to believe them.
Right before the election, 51 former intelligence officers or people who were in certain intelligence positions came out and they said that this is Russian disinformation, and Biden was using that as one of the
debate talking points.
Yes, as a proofs that this thing is not real. And no one even apologized since. Not even those, not Biden. Nothing is going on. There's some certain investigation of the Hunter Biden. But the people have to realize that this whole thing is so corrupt and so...
Yes.
You cannot trust the process anymore.
I would have been, 10 years ago, very trusting of our bureaucratic institutions, just because we had a real, a nonpartisan ethic, if you will. But it started to change under Obama. I actually was in a meeting with some other colonels in the DOJ back in 2012, and I asked the question about partisanship within the DOJ, and I was assured by one of the deputy AGs that it was not a problem there. But now, looking back on it, I think, oh my gosh, you know, it's a huge problem, because look at how, what was his name? Thibault was the guy, the FBI officer who suppressed, the prosecutor who suppressed the information on the Hunter Biden laptop. They had that laptop for years. They knew what was on it. They suppressed the information only to be able to help to help Biden win, obviously. That's why they did it.
Yeah, right.
So that's election interference in the first order, you know, so.
And nothing is going on?
Yeah, nothing. Right. And, you know, the Republicans, the difference with Republicans is they're very polite. They want to trust the institutions. They want to be, you know, they want to have a good relationship with the leadership in the various agencies. But we need to have some more that are willing to stand up and say something, like Tulsi Gabbard. You You know,
I love
thank
her.
God, the best Democrat.
I
you
love
know?
her. Yeah.
Yeah.
She
So,
was. I still don't understand when Biden had on the same stage, like another woman he could pick as a VP if he would be really about, oh, we need someone who is
right.
person of color and a woman and
Right.
an experienced politician. She was there.
She was there.
The fact he chose Kamala.
Right.
That
There's only
explains
one
something.
reason they picked Kamala.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The thing is, Tulsi is amazing. I felt so good when she left the Democratic Party. Like, she wasn't with them, like, whatsoever. Because just when I was listening her twice on Joe Rogan's show, she was there for over 2 hours. Who can talk for 2 hours and not get into some heated situation or debate and conflict?
Yes.
I really like people who can put their skin out there like that. Can you imagine Biden being 2 hours there with Joe Rogan and be answering his questions? Like, that would be the end of the world, because he would ask him like everything he never wants to be asked.
Right.
And he would ask
He was getting a lot of very softball questions, I thought, in some of those
debates,
interviews and
Yes,
debates and
yeah.
things.
So what do you think that actually happened when you say that 2012 you've been on the meeting and it was all pretty much smooth, you were sure that there's no bias going on in those agencies, and all of a sudden flip? Like, do you see some certain pattern, or do you think it's because of Trump was there and they kind of had to make sure no outsider is gonna come into that inner circle and will understand really how things works, or so they're trying to prevent that from again happening? Or what's your take
I
on
see
that?
it kind of as a perfect storm. So people hated Trump. They really hated Trump because he became a Republican. He was always a Democrat before. And he became a Republican. And for some reason, he became, I don't know whether it's because his daughter became an Orthodox Jew or he somehow came to appreciate the role of religion and civic life in the United States, because he obviously does. But so it would have been interesting had he run as a Democrat. Having said that, he became a Republican. They hated him. He says enough things that sound dumb enough that they can exploit. But also, I think the big deal is he's not a globalist. He did put America first. And whether you agree with that or disagree with it, that doesn't fit well with the George Soroses of the world and the World Economic Forum guy, Klaus Schwab, and doesn't sit well with, the Trudeaus and the Macrons and things who are trying to make a more globalist vision of the world, change the American-centric post-World War II world order with something completely different. And so it's hard to say, but I think it was a lot of different factors. I do know that everything changed under Obama, right? He appointed partisans, dedicated partisans, to their credit, actually, dedicated partisans, right? And the problem is that once they get in there, it's hard to get them out, and a normal Democrat would not have appointed, for example, card-carrying communists to their administration, but he did, so because he wanted to be inclusive, and he was, I'm sure, influenced by, there are a lot of sort of communist economic theory is very interesting to read. It's a point of view.
It's a theory.
And it can be a tool, actually, to understand things. So, but it's not the
way how to run things on the larger scale.
Right. I wouldn't support it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, so you had people that entered into the system at that time, and then over time, the system transformed. So hope and change. So he brought a lot of change. He didn't bring a lot of hope because people got very polarized during the Obama years. There wasn't an opportunity that President Obama missed to stir up racial division, if you will, whether it be the Ferguson riots or the the Beergate situation where the policeman wanted to know the name of the black professor up in Boston before he let him in the house, just to make sure he was who he said he was. And then the professor refusing to do so, and then Obama chiming in that it was a racist act by the policeman, but the policeman was really just doing his job. I wouldn't want anybody to go in my house without a policeman checking their identity first. So, yeah. So I think the change happened during Obama, and this is Trump threw a wrench in all those plans, and he's not a globalist.
Yeah, I kind of view this. I view this whole topic the same way, that he was definitely someone who doesn't fit their agenda.
Correct.
And kind of like interrupted the whole thing, and because of that, there is those crazy things happening that you see right now, like declining trust into intelligence organization and institutions and agencies, and that's really bad because, you know, as a country, we need those institutions.
Right. We need to trust our institutions.
Exactly.
On the other hand, we need to question our institutions when they're not. See, it's two sides of the coin, right? It's good when you can trust your institutions, but it's also important to be able to test and verify your institutions.
Always question
and to know when you see the red light going off on the dashboard that something is wrong.
Yeah, so. That's right. So what do you think is going to happen with this whole Hunter Biden story? Do you think it's going to be just dismissed? Because he did, for sure, he did few felonies. Like he lied on the gun applications, on the background checks.
Right.
He did a lot of things.
He did a lot of things. He did a lot of things that if a Trump follower, or say Trump's son, had done it, he would be in jail by now, right? So there is more than a perception of a double standard. So here, Hunter Biden was shielded and protected by people inside the FBI, the Bureau, and the agency, the Department, the DOJ, and that would not have been afforded to a Republican.
Yeah, of course.
So what will happen? I don't know. I think personally that they will make a minor charge. They'll do some plea deal, and he'll get off lightly, unlike, again, demonstrating the double standard, right? So
it all started with Hillary already, like with all her emails and with all this investigation with James Comey, who was really pushed by pretty much everyone on the Democratic side, including the former president Bill Clinton. There was a lot of pressure coming from the Attorney General at the time to not really persecute her. But there was a lot of things that she did wrong, including completely destroying all the servers.
Oh, yeah.
And all that.
Smashing her
with a hammer,
and
using programs that are completely deleting the files without any possibility of recovering them.
Yeah.
All that deserves a questions. And the fact that you cannot even ask those things, it's very weird. It's very undermining the system as a whole. And when you hear the same people talking about, you know, issues all over the planet in Russia or Saudi Arabia, how the hell I can even trust them?
Correct.
You know, like they are doing bad things, they are lying here on our soil, and then they are telling me the truth I'm supposed to believe, and that is true, you know? I'm like, guys, like you first have to have some credit in order for me to trust you. So
trust is more than diminished right now. I'd say it's really hurting because you don't know who they're working for. I mean, if I could get paid and make a weird speculation, I mean, to me, on the face of it, given the Hunter Biden laptop stuff and the change of American policies and things, you would almost say Biden and his administration are working together along with Chinese communist organizations, you know, globalist organizations, that they're not necessarily working for the United States of America and the people, that they're kind of more in sync with the globalists.
Yeah, because everything they do reflect that. So that's not even a wild guess or something.
It's almost not like a wild guess.
Yeah, everything they do is confirming what you just said. So it's very hard.
Seemingly.
Yeah.
I mean...
it's very hard to argue with that. Very hard.
Right.
What do you think, when you compare first 2 years of Trump and now first 2 years of Biden? When it was during the Trump era, all we hear was... Trump collusion, Russia collusion, Trump having affairs with...
he's a Russian agent.
Yeah, Russian agent.
Stuff like that.
Trump having affairs with porn stars. Always Trump something. They were just fabricating things. now there's a lot of things going on. Either it's Afghanistan, it's drug crisis in the United States,
right,
the huge spike of prices, you know, and they can say it's because of something, but it doesn't matter. It's happening, so you have to deal with that.
Right.
You know, you have a lot of different issues going on, crime, like crazy levels. How would you compare the first 2 years of Trump and first 2 years of Biden when it comes to domestic and international, I would say, strength of United States? Strength within and strength,
right.
You know what I mean.
Right. So I think the first 2 years of Trump were very tumultuous in the sense that he had a lot of scandals that were deliberately brought out to undermine him. I remember in the first days when Sally Yates, the acting attorney general, she opposed him when he decided to list 5 terrorist countries in the Middle East and 1 North Korea, actually 4 and 1, and to restrict immigration from those countries. And he was being treated as if he was a racist and all this stuff. And, and Sarah Yates said it was unconstitutional. And I'm just a guy that can read a statute. So I read the statute, and the statute was perfectly clear. The president can, for whatever reason, declare a country to be a problem and say we're going to restrict immigration from that. It's authority directly delegated to the president. And I thought, wow, Sally Yates must
playing the race card.
Must be a partisan, because I can read the statute. It's very clear, and it doesn't say that he can't. So that was a little bit off-putting. So the first 2 years, so he had Paul Ryan. He had that we controlled the Congress. Not we, but the Republicans controlled the Congress, and he didn't get much done. Well, everything he did through muscling through it and persevering. And then his second 2 years were fairly successful. You had the peace deals between Israel and 4 or 5 other different Arab states. You had
the North Korea de-escalation.
The North Korea stopped launching their intermediate range and their long-range ballistic missiles. You know, so he definitely de-escalated the situation with North Korea. I mean, oddly...
But and what about domestically? Like, how do you think people did under him? Do you think like that they did better than under Biden?
Oh, and economically, everyone did better. I mean, the policies were good. So the United States became a net exporter of energy, which happened under Trump. That's a miracle. That was a miracle, because the only thing that holds us back is government red tape, right? That's what stops people from making investments. So you had that. The border was relatively closed compared to what it is. We've had 5 million illegal migrants enter I call them immigrants, but they're really migrants, enter the United States since Joe Biden took office. So that's a real problem in the sense that, you know, they are going to either be depressing wages for normal people, or they are going to be a burden to society in the sense that they're going to use medical services, schooling, you know, they're going to need housing, all those things.
Plus the amount of drugs that is being smuggled. That's what I see as one of the main problems nowadays, like compared to years before.
Right.
Because when you go to those big cities, either New York, Los Angeles, you see drugs openly being distributed on the streets. And
openly. You see crime open. Crime is in the open.
Daylight.
Although I did just have my wallet pickpocketed in Athens when I was over there.
Oh, good.
I lived in Europe 8 years and never got pickpocketed. I finally got pickpocketed in Athens.
Oh, you're finally European.
Yeah.
I mean, so definitely I feel like people had a better standard of living under Trump.
They did.
It's kind of hard to say.
Wages were rising and inflation was under control. And the big sort of statistic you can look at there, sorry to interrupt, by the way.
No, it's all good.
It's called labor participation rate. So the labor participation rate, meaning the people that are able to work actually participating in the labor force, was the highest it had been for 40 years under Trump. Damn. More people entered the workforce, because of the jobs that were available. Now the labor participation rate has dropped. You still have demand, but you also have an inflationary environment, and now you have supply issues because of, we have both supply issues and rising wages. So that's going to create a complicated situation to fix. So things were definitely better under Trump, even though I thought it was interesting. Just the other night, the president of Germany went on national television to said basically we were wrong about Russia. We were wrong. We thought we could bring Russia in, make them a civilized country, through trade, through engagement, and we were wrong. And now it's going to be a very difficult decade. Things are going to get harder in Germany. And they're getting ready to have energy shortages, heating oil shortages, things in Germany. They're going to have problems this winter in Germany because of the war in Ukraine.
Well, not only in Germany.
So, but when he had that speech, I thought how hilarious, because I remember when Trump spoke at the UN.
Oh, they were laughing at him.
The German delegation was laughing at him when Trump was saying exactly what the German president said the other night on television.
More and more often I see people wearing a shirt that says Trump was right about everything. When you really look at it without the emotions and without being like anti-Trump and anti his persona, which I completely understand, and you look up straight on the policies and opinions, you have to really say that this guy was right about a lot of things. If you cannot really say that, then means you still have to you still have some certain way ahead of you to be completely to be more like open-minded, because you really have to put aside the ego part and everything.
Set aside the ego and the partisanship. I know people that will vote Democrat, or actually we'll vote Republican no matter what. It's like, that's for a functioning democracy. You can't be that way.
Yeah, exactly.
I voted for Republicans. I voted for Democrats. So you vote for the best people and the ones that are consistent with your values and the ones whom you believe will do a better job policy-wise. But if you vote just like a zombie or a robot, you're going to, that in and of itself is a subversion of the democratic system. So
I would say that the majority of people in this country is really that way, that they go either red or blue, no matter what.
Right.
They go and they will fight to death for it. No matter what the side will do, they will always find some logical explanation behind why is it good, and we're gonna still support it. But maybe inside they know it's wrong, But my question, follow up to this thing, is who you think is more respected on the global stage, Biden or Trump?
I would say Biden is more respected, but for who knows what reason. I mean, nobody liked Trump. So respect is a funny word. So depending on how you mean respect. So, for example, I don't believe Vladimir Putin would have launched an attack on Ukraine if Trump had been president, because Trump had already told him that he would take drastic measures. Biden, he created a vacuum. He created a vacuum in Afghanistan. He created a vacuum in Iraq. Whereas Trump destroyed ISIS simply by letting the military do its job instead of micromanaging them. So, in one way, I would say Trump was more respected, mainly because he was unpredictable and people were a little bit afraid. And I got to hand it to the Europeans. They didn't like him, but they tried to treat him fairly well, with maybe the exception of Angela Merkel, who kind of, was public.
They didn't care really
about it. And whereas Biden, he's perceived as weak, but they like him because he's one of them. So I believe Biden is more respected simply because he's viewed to be one of them. If any of that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
it does.
One is a real respect, one is maybe a fake respect.
Yeah.
So
and how about the enemies of United States? Who you think they fear more? Trump or Biden? Do you think that they fear? Do you think you already pretty much answered that? Like
the adversaries of the United States?
Yes.
Well, I believe that they probably fear Trump more, in the sense of he was just hard to predict. So when you can't, for example, Trump was correct when he said, "This really got me under Obama." Obama was always broadcasting what we were going to do. You know, we're going to keep so many troops there until such and such a time. You should never broadcast what you're going to do. You're just doing their intelligence work for them. Whereas if you leave them in doubt, create uncertainty, then it makes it harder for them to plan. So Trump was better at creating uncertainty. And honestly, as much as you can complain about how he treated the NATO members, it's been a long time that countries in NATO were not paying a fair share, if you will, meeting the minimum requirement to defend their own countries.
Yeah, he was not afraid to push them, right? Like being
he was not afraid to push them.
And it was, I think it goes with pretty much everything that he did, not only with NATO, but with everything. He was not afraid to push on the serious issues.
Correct.
And I think people like that, because when they see just that shallow, usual politics, they are tired of that, because they only elect some bureaucrat for 4 years.
Right.
And he's just repeating the same lines, oh, we have to do this, we have to stand for this. But nothing is really going on. And then you have someone who's gonna go there and who's like, and who will say, yeah, and who is not afraid to say, stop fucking with us.
Right.
And once you have that,
right.
I mean, the average daily citizens like that, because that's the way how they speak, that's the way how they go through life. So finally, there was someone on their side. Even when the guy,
excuse me,
it's all good. Even when this guy was a billionaire, they still thought that this guy is more on their side than those typical bureaucrats who are there for over 50 years.
More like a normal person.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, if you look around, you were saying you see a lot of people wearing shirts. If you look at all the tradesmen, all the people that repair windows, build walls,
who work,
electricians, the actual people who work, they've all got Trump stickers on their trucks.
Exactly.
You know, whereas the lawyer class, the academic class, the chattering class, the press, the media, they don't have Trump stickers.
So actually that was very visible during the hurricane, because right after the hurricane, you couldn't see any electric vehicles. You only see trucks run by guys with a beard with Trump stickers on them, and it was very visible all over.
It was
all over, and they were from all different states. You could see them from Texas. You could see them from different states. It wasn't just a Florida thing.
Right.
But I think that Florida is flipping red more and more day by day.
Oh, I agree.
Because of people like even moving here from all those like failed cities or failed states run by the Democrats, right?
Isn't it ironic? We have failed cities and we have failed states. I can think of one successful Democratic state, that's Massachusetts. The rest of the Democratic states have big problems. I mean, huge problems.
Huge.
And the only reason Massachusetts does well is it's small. It has Boston. It has a lot of universities. It has a lot of money. So when you got a lot of money, nothing's an issue, right? But if you have to actually make your budget work and you're from another state like New Mexico or Colorado, you're going to have problems because you don't have that kind of money to make a successful state.
That is bringing us to my next topic, and that is the elections.
The midterms.
It's coming faster than I actually thought. It's like all of a sudden things can be changed next week, you know, all those vaccine mandates, all this like crime, forgiveness, all these pretty much hot topics, hot issues could be completely different reality starting next week. What is your take on those three things? Congress, Senate, and the governor races. What are your predictions?
Well, it's hard to say because honestly, I don't trust the systems. I don't like it.
I don't blame you.
I don't like it when a state like Pennsylvania, you can have a guy up 600,000 votes on election night, and somehow over the course of a week they find enough votes to overtake that. It's very, very unusual. I mean, so I think in a perfect world where we actually checked voter registrations
IDs,
and voter eligibility, I think it would go very well for the Republicans. But I don't know. Is that okay?
It's completely fine.
Okay, great.
It's a part of the podcast.
Sorry, I didn't silence my phone.
That's all good.
But anyway, I think it would be good for the Republicans. However, you know, there are states that don't enforce voter registration. There are states that don't check the ID. There are states that mail out ballots, you know,
California.
You've seen the movie 2000 Mules.
It's a kind of different topic.
I'll lend it to you.
I have it. I don't want to watch it because if I will watch it, I will just hate the whole system. I know what it's about. I've read about it. Like I when it comes to principles, I agree with the whole thing. I'm on the board with you, but I'm just so afraid to watch that because I think it would just kill all my expectations about the elections and about everything.
Right.
I will rather stay uninformed and dumb in order to protect myself.
Ignorance is bliss. Well, the beauty of 2000 Mules is it shows how geospatial intelligence and human network analysis works. And if you do watch that movie, you'll see that if you have a close election, it doesn't take that many motivated activists to stuff ballots in a state where they don't require an identification or something, you know.
Which is a lot of states. People in Europe, particularly, they don't know about this because our election work
are very tight.
Yeah, you come with ID.
Right.
They have a list of you. You only can go to one specific institution.
Right. One precinct.
Yeah. You can go to one location to vote, which is assigned to where you live. It's very nearby, very close by.
Right.
And if you want to vote somewhere else, you have to let them know ahead.
Right.
If I want to vote on embassy, if I'm living abroad, I have to actually file a request months before that.
Right.
And there is a deadline for that as well.
Right.
So I am
we
not...
would call that voter suppression.
Yeah, or racist thing, right?
Or racist. We would say it's racist. I wouldn't say it's racist. That's the excuse that's used.
Yes, exactly.
That somehow black Americans are somehow incapable of getting an identification. You know, that they're that incompetent that they can't get an identification. That in and of itself is a racist thing, right? So,
but they are a racist party, you know. Every statement
historically they have been.
Yeah, even in present times, like when they are favoring one group
over another,
that's a racist thing, and it doesn't matter what's the color of the group, you know. So the fact that they will tell you, oh, you know, we've been hit hard by hurricane, but we have to first, you know, help people of color. Like, hello, like how you can help someone based on their race,
right?
Like,
it seems very un-American.
Isn't the point of we the people that we are just the people, not just we are? Yeah,
supposed to be colorblind.
Yeah, so that is really driving me nuts, the way how they are able to play a racial card even in the election matter.
Right.
Which is nonsense. It's complete nonsense. You get ID and you go to vote. Not that you can drop a ballot or that someone can harvest the ballots from the people.
Right. And change it. Yeah.
Or just like, how the hell can you give your ballot to someone else?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense, but it's happening.
It's a big problem, and you know, what can you say?
Nothing, really.
I want to know. So I hope Republicans will do well, only because that's how far gone I believe the Democratic Party is now. It's not like, you know, I've worked for Democratic candidates as a volunteer before, but that party is long gone. Damn. And
I think like those parties left what they were originally all about. I think that the Democrats were completely different I would say, Bush, let's say. Yeah. Pre-2001, you know, like during the Bill Clinton era and even before. And a lot of Republicans nowadays would actually agree with those policies before 2001. Yeah.
You would find... it used to be many issues were bipartisan, held by both Republicans and Democrats. Now there's almost no bipartisan issues.
So
so there's a bill in California right now. My wife just told me about it. That's going through the legislature. You'd be able to abort a child up to 28 days after birth. In other words, the baby can be born and you have 28 days to allow it. You can decide to let it die.
That's crazy, right?
It's a crazy, I mean, it's evil. I mean, we can say that
crazy
word.
Is not even enough.
Yeah. Right. It's evil. So, I mean, that's how far the Democratic Party has gone now. It used to be the Democratic Party was split. Half were kind of pro-choice and half were pro-life. Now it's all gone. And they're not just pro-choice up to 12 weeks like you find in Europe. They're pro-choice up to
forever.
The day of birth, or in this bill in California, you can let the baby die up to 28 days after it's born.
You know, it's this pro-choice topic from those people doesn't even resonate with me, because the fact that they were pushing the vaccine mandates for everyone and there was no pro-choice. So every time when
There's
someone...
no pro-choice when it comes to a vaccine.
Yeah, every time, like, when they will say, like, oh, we are pro-choice, I'm okay, like, you do your thing. But first of all, like, this doesn't include just you. There's also baby included in that fact, and no one talks about it. And on the other hand, where was my pro-choice? When you all were yelling at me.
My body, my choice.
Exactly, right? So I'm always like, hey, you better little calm down with that my body, my choice, because you guys have really few things that you have to, like, kind of communicate with each other.
You're a murderer if you don't get the vaccine.
Yeah.
Because you might give that thing to somebody else. You know, I've heard that.
That's also a proven lie nowadays.
And that's a lie. So the vaccines, we now know, were a bust. They did not work. They didn't prevent you from getting it. They didn't prevent you from having it. They didn't prevent you from spreading it to other people. And they messed with your DNA. So,
but they didn't prevent Pfizer from making money, so it's all good.
But they did not, right? Moderna, Pfizer,
it's all good,
and
you know?
Right.
So let's go back to that election. So do you think that the Florida is gonna stay red?
Florida will go red because it's over. I don't think they stand a chance in Florida now. You have a popular governor who's followed conservative principles. The state was the only state, maybe one of two, that thrived even in spite of the pandemic. And now it looks as if Miami-Dade County is a historically Democratic stronghold, always votes Democratic. It looks like they will go Republican.
Wow.
If they do, then it's all over, right? Lights out. So for Florida, it's much clearer. Although I do see a lot of election material from the Democrats. I saw a woman standing at the corner of Jacaranda and Route 41 holding up a sign. It said, "Reject hate, vote Democratic." And I wanted to go over and talk to her, but I figured I would have needed a psychiatrist. So I didn't.
It almost go one against each other. Like, reject hate, vote Democrat. Like, that's the most divisive party ever. It's ridiculous.
It is true.
You literally have hundreds of thousands of people moving here because to get away. And there are people here who are so blind, who are gonna still tell you that you are wrong. And you and all those hundreds of thousands of people who have the same view, who are escaping that mess. Okay. How about, like, the Congress? Do you think the Republicans are gonna take the majority?
In Congress, I believe that they stand a very good chance of taking the majority. The problem, again, is our election system, which allows for, you know, we have a long history in our urban centers of ballot stuffing, and everyone wants to bury their heads in the sand over it, but it's a real problem. Unless you check their identity, verify that they're a U.S. citizen and things like that, you get all kinds of people voting that should not be voting. And now, of course, another big problem, which we haven't even gotten to the bottom of yet, these machines are all hooked up to the internet, basically, and we know that others are dabbling in those systems. So
it's not counted here. It doesn't belong here. It's not owned by U.S. government or anything. It's all foreign companies, foreign institutions, and foreign countries. It's ridiculous. I've seen a lot of videos from different officials, former CIA guys, former FBI guys, former whoever you can imagine,
who have the same concerns.
And you will never see those guys being promoted by Biden.
Exactly. Not even on Fox News.
Of course.
Not even.
It's a part of the mainstream as well.
Right.
What they were explaining how this whole thing works, I almost couldn't believe that this is a voting system of the U.S. election.
We need to go back to hand counting.
Right?
Yeah, just like everywhere else.
And of course, there's always going to be some certain...
Well, if you do it at the precinct level, it's always doable. The problem is, like in 2016, they started doing these industrial scale vote counting centers where all the ballots from all the precincts would come in to one place by truckload or whatever, and then they would be fed into the machines, and people wouldn't be allowed in. How do you observe that? You know, you're 20 feet away. How do you know whether that's a real ballot, really signed? And then they have this thing called adjudication. So if the ballot doesn't go in and isn't read properly by the machine, there's one person sitting at a computer screen that can vote that ballot without any oversight. So
change
pretty much. You just wonder how many ways you can say stupid, right?
Yeah.
Because if everybody were perfectly honest, it would be great. But the problem is human nature and history tells us that not everybody's honest. So
What do you think about the Senate? Do you think it's going to be a close race?
I think that, you know, according to the Cook Report and Real Clear Politics, the Republicans will pick up both houses in Congress, the House of Representatives and the Senate, up to 54.
Damn.
Maybe only 51, likely only 51 or 52, but maybe up to 54. I would like to see it happen, but I'm not going to hold my breath because I don't trust our systems. I trust the ideas of the institutions, but I don't trust the people executing. Like, for example, we have secretaries of state in states that are ignoring orders from the Supreme Courts of those states on, for example, in Pennsylvania, they were just ordered that you can't count a ballot if it comes late, if it doesn't have the signature, and if it doesn't have the date and the address information written on it. Because in 2016, they counted 200,000 of those, right? Giving Biden an 80,000 vote win in the state. So,
but it's okay because that's for democracy, you know?
Right. So it's perfectly the most secure election in history, right? So the real problem is, so in Pennsylvania, the state Supreme Court, mostly Democrat, said do not count those ballots. But now you have certain counties and the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania saying basically that they might just ignore that.
Yeah.
How does that happen? How does that happen?
You can just ignore Supreme Court nowadays. It's pretty nice, right?
And
it's very democratic. Yeah.
Yeah, in 2016, Alito ordered Pennsylvania to segregate ballots that arrived late. They never did it. No consequences. So
it always seems like if it comes from the right side, there are always no consequences.
Correct.
No matter what they do. It doesn't matter if it's the laptop story,
right,
or if it's whatever.
Right.
There are just never any consequences, which is nuts.
Yep, I agree.
So you think they're gonna take Congress and Senate as well?
I believe for sure they'll take Congress, the House. I believe they'll take the Senate just because they can't overcome it. The question is what will happen in places like Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Will they get those extra seats? Because now it looks good. I mean, there seems to be a red tide. We say red tide. It means a Republican tide.
A red wave.
Happening right now because people are fed up with the
BS.
Biden administration and the COVID vaccines.
Yeah, all that un-American thing. You know, everything that you've seen that doesn't fit your mentality as someone who lived here his entire life.
Yeah.
Every time you turn on TV or you open the news, you don't recognize like what's going on. And I'm sure even with your experience when it comes to your military service and everything, that adds on top of that as a bonus. Right. Because average citizens don't recognize the US. But you as a guy who did what did, you have another step of understanding of how things can work or cannot work.
Or supposed to work.
That's better, you know?
Like, here's another good example. I'm sorry not to bore you, but Lloyd Austin, who's now the Secretary of Defense, I worked for him when he was a 4-star general. And so we have a law on the books called the Hyde Amendment. And you're not supposed to spend any government. It was a compromise made back in the 90s. You're not supposed to spend any taxpayer money on funding an abortion because half the country believed it was wrong.
Yes.
So this was the compromise. People could have abortions, but we wouldn't be using taxpayer money to fund the abortions. Well, now you have Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, saying we're going to pay money to our soldiers and airmen and Marines to go travel to a state to get an abortion if they need one, if they live in a state that does not allow for abortion. And I'm thinking, well, isn't that just another violation of the Hyde Amendment? You're spending government money basically indirectly paying for an abortion by sending your sailor or your Marine or your airman or your soldier there. So in my days in the Army, we would have seen that exactly for what it is and said, oh, we can't do that because that would be against the law. But things being against the law does not seem to be a constraint anymore on a lot of the Democratic Party and the people in this administration.
If it comes from that right side.
If it comes from that side, they don't see the law as anything restrictive.
Man. That's crazy. I mean, you cannot just do this forever. You cannot be just ignoring rules because otherwise you don't have a country. You don't have society. You don't have intelligence service, and you don't have citizens that trust you. So you have no one to govern.
Well, one has to ask, is that the intent? Maybe that's the intent.
What do you think? Is it intent?
Well, I know there are people that believe that that there are people intent on creating societal fracture in the United States. And then when you pick up the pieces, then you build whatever you want.
Do you think that this is coming from inside or outside or both?
Well, my wife would believe from the globalist class, you know, that they have their claws deep into, for example, George Soros funds half the Democratic politicians in the United States. You know,
including the district attorneys. So it comes from the bottom all the way to the top.
All the way to the top, right?
Yes.
So that's influence, right? If you want to talk about influence, there you have it. You know, that's influence. So,
so it's probably both.
It's probably both, but it could be simply just a worldview kind of thing. You know, you have a class of people that thinks a certain way, and they see America as being this racially unjust, historically corrupt thing. Take the 1619 Project, you know, and they want to undo it so they can remake it. And if they do that, it's going to be a big problem. A lot of people own guns here. You know.
Yeah, I read that there is almost like 300 million guns.
Probably. One for every person in the United States.
At least one.
Yeah.
You know, at least one.
But the funny thing is, the Democrats only want to take the ones from the people that legally own guns and follow the rules, because they make no attempts to get the guns out of the criminals, the illegal guns.
Those are their voters, you know. So
right, because those are their voters. Exactly.
You cannot do that, you know. All right, so last topic, or last thing that is on my mind right now is your prediction for a future president 2024 on both sides. Who do you think will be a Democratic nominee?
Well, at this rate, it'll still be Biden, but it may be Governor Gavin Newsom.
No.
There you go. You ran away from him, didn't you?
No. How is that possible? Like,
well, he looks good. He's
doesn't matter.
He's smooth talker.
Dude, look, as a mayor of San Francisco, look where he got the city. To what point?
I agree.
Now look at California as a whole. Look where it is. People are fleeing.
Right. People are leaving California. So
Newsom. Okay.
But he's very popular in that crowd, and
it's crazy
because he's a progressive.
Yeah.
He's
it's crazy.
That sort of you know, Macron mentioned something about this about a year ago. He stated that American leftism is a problem and should not come to Europe. They're more like classical leftists in Europe. Over here we have a strange type of leftists. They're transgenderism, you know.
They have more layouts,
more cultural sort of expressions, if you will, and they have more here. So Macron was probably right. Our form of leftism is very crazy, and
they usually are born in California. All those ideas.
A lot of those ideas come out of California, right? So, but
wow.
I think Biden at this point, although there is a kind of a fresh push under the radar to get him to not run again, who knows where that will lead. In terms of the Republicans, I think most people in my shoes would love to see Ron DeSantis be the nominee, just because he doesn't have all the baggage of Donald Trump. But I think whoever is the nominee, whether it be Donald Trump or DeSantis, I bet you a lot of people will vote for them anyway, just because it's been a bad couple years here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you think it would be interesting to see a Trump as a president and DeSantis as his VP? Because DeSantis, I love him, but he doesn't seem like someone who could stand on the stage on that G20 and be like a leader that represents US, just because he is used to that lower level politics, which he feels very comfortable with, and he's doing really well there. But now imagine him standing next to the Saudis, next to Putin, next to president of Brazil, India, and all those like large nations. Do you think it would be great for him to be first as a VP and then maybe transition if his popularity is going to remain the same?
Here's the issue with that. There are Trump haters in the Republican Party. That 10% of the Republican Party that despise Trump. And how do you get around that? I don't know. Maybe if DeSantis was the VP, that might be good. I think Mike Pompeo would be an excellent presidential candidate or VP. Actually, I used to think Nikki Haley would be good, because she's really an iron lady when it comes down to it. She did a great job at the United Nations. And so maybe, but I think she and Trump had kind of a falling out over the January 6th thing, which is a whole nother story, right? So I believe probably at this point it'll be Trump, just because he has a big following. He has the guys that are, working on the polls, and he has the bricklayers, and he has the people, the tradesmen. He has those blue collar workers, and they like him.
Do you think with that Mar-a-Lago raid, they are really trying to get him indicted so he cannot run?
Well, the funny thing is, it probably would fall on its face, because the Constitution doesn't say anything about being indicted. It's like Lula down there in Brazil. He ran again. He was in jail, but he ran again. And
it's crazy, right?
Yeah, maybe just got reelected. So
maybe,
elected again, maybe. I'm not sure. You see, there's those mechanical machines again.
It's interesting because right now it's already in the YouTube community guidelines. You cannot question that election already. So it's, again, you are not allowed to ask when it comes to that Brazilian thing.
It's always strange when you're not allowed to ask the question.
Yeah, when you cannot ask a question, it's very...
I only asked the question because Bolsonaro's party did very well at all state and local and national levels, and somehow Bolsonaro lost. Now, he may have lost, but it's strange to me. I have a little blinking light in here going, that's strange. His party picked up seats, but somehow he lost.
So do you think if Trump would be indicted, he still can run and still...
That's what I hear. I hear that it doesn't matter, because the constitutional requirement only lists his age. And that's it.
Maybe they're trying to overwhelm him with...
they want to overwhelm him.
With
they want him to self-disqualify. Yeah. So the Mar-a-Lago raid was very interesting from the standpoint that they were already working it out with the archives. And he did do an executive order declassifying everything he took with him to Mar-a-Lago. And you have other presidents like Bush or Obama who took hundreds of thousands of documents with them. And we know no one looked at those documents carefully. So there's probably ostensibly classified documents in their libraries sitting there. And
plus they wait over a year and a half.
And they wait over a year and a half
to get that, right?
Over a issue of the archives. Normally not even a civil, it's like a civil problem, not a criminal problem. Yeah. So it's a little weird.
And when you look at it, this whole action, they are waiting for him not being there. They are waiting 3 days. They already have the court document to go in.
And they only went to a magistrate. They didn't go to, they went to the lowest possible judge. You'd think with the president, they would have gone to the circuit court or one of the big federal courts to get that warrant. And the warrant was so broadly written. I mean, it was all documents between January 21st of 2017 to then normally a warrant, it's like we need
specific
this set of documents.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all weird.
As someone who used to work for a government, what is your take on the fact that if Trump would be there, he is still surrounded by Secret Service, which belongs to Department of Homeland Security, and then you have those FBI agents. It would be like pretty much situation that not many times in the history happen, that you have FBI agents coming to search a president, which is guarded by
Secret Service,
another governmental branch.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think would happen in that situation?
I think it would go to court. I think it would be.
Do you think they wouldn't take anything? They would tell them like, no, you are not going anywhere. Even when you have this warrant, you have this court signed, you are not.
No, they would go with a warrant. If there was a warrant, they would.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's how we're all trained, right? We respect the process. The problem is has the process become corrupt? You know, is it become selective? You know, applies to you, but not, you know, rules for thee, but not for me, you know, so.
And plus, on the top of that, those agents, these FBI agents were flying out of D.C. They were not the locals.
Right, they were not the local, right, they were not the local bureau.
Why?
A field office. They were, right, that's actually happening quite a bit. With a lot of the January 6th protesters that are being arrested, they're being all handled out of the D.C. crowd, not the local field offices. Because from what I've heard from people in the FBI is there's a lot of dissent over the direction of the FBI and the DOJ right now. That they feel that the people in Washington are corrupt and out of touch.
And those people out there in those offices in the DC can be used as the weapon for those who need them to be the weapon for their political opponents.
Well, that's what people. I mean,
it looks like
are they weaponized? It looks like it's weaponized, right? They're being used against political opponents. You know,
I mean, it's just the whole situation. You know, my parents came at the same day for a vacation when that happened, and I was waiting them on the Miami airport, and I just saw it in the news that they are raiding Mar-a-Lago. And they come, we talk, you know, briefly, whatever, and then I told them what's going on, and because they don't live here, they don't understand how big of a deal it is.
Such a big deal.
I'm like, this never happened in the history.
Right. Never.
It's like such a, like, you will always remember this day because it's just one of those days when something happened that never happened before. And then I explained them the situation. Then a couple days passed by, and I drove by I wanted to see the scene. There was nothing really that much going on besides some, I would say, higher level of security in the area. But just my understanding of the whole situation that you are a former president and official government institution or organization that you were in charge of just not that long time ago is going after you. Man, that's
well, they were actually working against him while he was president. I mean, Comey, McCabe, all those guys. I mean,
well, I think that's it for now.
Okay,
that was great, man.
Oh, good.
That was really.
Sorry, I
really,
talked too much.
No, that's why I talk too much. Like I wish you would talk like all the time, but those are the topics I wanted to cover. So thank you very much for that. I will be more than glad if you will like to come again.
Yeah,
once
let's
in a
do
while.
it again sometime.
You know?
Actually, I want to introduce you to Jim Weaver. And would you be interested in? I know a woman who ran over the
I would.
Berlin Wall.
I would.
Okay.
You already told me, and yes, I would. I never talked to someone like that.
Yeah, she's fascinating. And,
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Yeah, and we can definitely even meet up like without filming. Whatever,
oh yeah,
you know?
first meet socially, and
yeah,
and then she can. I'll send her my this one if I look presentable and I'm not drooling, I'll send it to her.
No, you're gonna be great. You'll see. You know?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, David, one more time, and I'll be more than happy if we can do this once in a while.
Okay, great.
Like just because US is going through such a dramatic, you know, part of its existence, and I think it's worth to comment on what's going on, and especially from someone who has your experience in a life, and that's something I'm really curious to know more about. So anytime, and
great. Okay.
Thank you very much. And
okay. Hubba.
Yeah. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Pokud vás tento díl zaujal, tak tady jsou další díly. A tady jsou další klipy. Mějte se.